in the shit. Hello. It's Monday again. Marisha, look at those grey hairs.
I just felt I've got like full Cruella de Vil on one side.
Who is that woman? Was it the Munsters?
Was it the Munsters?
Yeah, where she had it back.
You know what? I'll take that. I don't care. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, it was nearly Halloween. You should have pretended it was part of your costume. We're dressing up.
Well, this is, someone said, you trim up your front window. And I was like, I'll just put my face at it. That's scary. I don't care. Just angry Rita face at the front.
Anyway, we are live on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
We should probably say what we're here for. So, welcome to Shooting the Shit. Today, we are talking about childcare. So, obviously, this is a feminism plus business, not plus business, Facebook Live. So we're talking about all things women in workplace. And today is childcare, because that is a massive, massive thing for women. So, Marisha, do you have issues with childcare in the workplace?
Not really, no. I don't have children, but I guess
you're going to say I don't have issues then.
I've got loads of them, but this isn't for that. I guess so. I kind of come at it from firstly, I have to look at it from an employer perspective, because that has to be addressed, but also as a somebody that works with others, how does that or doesn't that affect business? Yeah. And not just ladies, gents and all others as well, because I have had, staff, and there is people have kids, and kids need things, kids get sick, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes along with it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from it today. So.
Good, and it is something we've kind of touched on in the past, and we will come back to in a minute. But it's that issue of often it's the people that don't have children that end up picking up the pieces of bad childcare, because parents, mums, dads have to run off to get their poorly children, and then all of a sudden it's the workers who are left at the company that are the ones that have to work when the parents aren't there. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Hannah, what are your issues with childcare?
Well, I do have children, one who is at school and one who is too small for childcare at the moment. But when Naya wasn't at school, we did pay for childcare, and good Lord, it was expensive. She was in nursery 3 days a week, and it was more than our mortgage by quite a lot. So, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember you telling me it was very nearly your wage, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like, within pounds of my wage, and the justification for me going back to work was I wanted to. And so we kind of thought, well, we're no better off, we're no worse off, but for my own sanity, I'd go back to work. And obviously it's a sliding scale. So you're back in the workplace, so you're earning more money, so you've got more opportunity for promotion and progression. And so eventually it did become worth it. But yeah, when Naya was a baby, it was, just pointless me working, but better for her, better for me. But it's phenomenally expensive. And if you haven't got parents, grandparents around that can or will look after your kids, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, and that's the issue, isn't it? So you live in Sheffield, you went to uni there and didn't come home.
I know.
But so when Leon was little, I had my mother-in-law who was 10 minutes away, and I had my mum who was 15 minutes away, and they shared. Leon did go to nursery, but they shared a lot of the beforehand and after. I used to drop him at one of their houses in the morning. They would give him his breakfast whilst I went to work. They would take him to nursery for his kind of part-time hours, because that's all they do at nursery. And then they would pick him up, and I would get him at like 6:30 after I'd finished work. So, that massively, massively reduced the cost for us. Just a minute. Shut up, Fern.
And I remember, Mum started taking him to playgroup, because I remember her saying he was becoming like an old lady. He needed to go and see other children. He was spending 5 days a week with older women, and he was becoming Very kind. And he's still now, when you take him out to a museum, he sits and has a pot of tea in the cafe, which just cracks me up. He loves a bloody pot of tea, does Leon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
for a pot of tea.
Yeah, and I think it's good for children to mix with other children. And for Naya, going to nursery brought her out of her shell, gave her confidence, introduced her to a community of people that she definitely wouldn't have otherwise been involved in. It introduced her to Disney and, you know, all things princessy and stuff, which was, she really enjoyed that. And it wasn't something that was on my radar, so we never looked at it. And actually, she really enjoyed the whole dressing up, fairies, princess malarkey.
Kids need it. Kids absolutely need it. And I think especially if they are only children, which Naya and Leon were, they have to absolutely go and spend time around other children, don't they? They need that socialization element.
But fuck me, is it expensive?
It is bloody expensive. It absolutely is.
It's not super reliable. So I was just reading before we came on about one of the benefits.
Done some research.
And
I love it. It's always just before we came on, though.
Yeah. 2 seconds before we started.
I've skimmed half of an article that said that one of the benefits of on-site childcare is that it is on-site. And, you know, if one of the massive drawbacks of nurseries in particular is that if they deem that your child's not fit to go in, then you've got to find another method of childcare. So, for example, children get weepy eyes constantly. Aubrey's not a dry eye in the house since she was born, because kids, you know, stick their fingers in their eyes and they're manky. And so I remember Naya was sent home multiple occasions with suspected conjunctivitis. And of course it wasn't conjunctivitis. It was, you know, there were no symptoms of conjunctivitis otherwise, except it was, you know, gungy. Or nuts are not allowed in. And
yeah, I was reading, there was something on Facebook the other day talking about the kind of unforeseen circumstances of health and safety gone mad, and they were basically saying, you know, this bloke was saying, like, I remember once when I fell off the climbing frame and broke my arm, and the teacher only phoned my mum at the end of the day when I passed out from the pain and said maybe you should come and get this child. Whereas nowadays, you know, you can't even send them in with Calpol, can you? They get the slightest thing. And it's the same with school, though. This is not just nursery. You know, they are so risk averse now that the slightest thing. I remember Leon, I think it was last year. Well, obviously they've not been bloody in this year, have they? But last year he ran into another child and they both bumped heads, and we had to go and get them. They had to come home. They might have a concussion. No, they've got a bloody concussion. They're kids. They bounce. Let them fucking bash into each other. It's good for them.
I once had to go and get Naya. I can't remember if it was from school or nursery because she'd got a splinter.
Oh my
Mind you, I remember when Naya was little, so we've got wooden floors in our houses, very old floorboards, so they're not like nicely polished wooden floorboards. And she once got a splinter, and my God, you would have thought her arm had been sawed off. The noise that child made about this bloody splinter, and it was fucking tiny. But yeah, so you know, even if they're at nursery, even if they're at school, you know, it's not a reliable source of childcare at all, is it? The drop of a hat, you've got to leave, you've got to go for them. There's things like, you know, parents' assemblies, and come and spend an afternoon in the classroom with your child so you can get a fucking migraine and feel like you want to throw yourself off.
People like that, apparently.
Apparently some people do. Yeah, some people do.
But honestly, I don't know if you like spending time at your child's school.
Yeah, nobody really does. I went in once, and I swear to God, I've got a new respect from teachers after spending half an hour in that fucking classroom. It was horrendous. But anyway, yeah. So this is one of the massive
now about how much you hate kids, basically.
To be fair, I don't think it will be a surprise to anybody.
Oh, poor Leon. Anyway, but that's the thing, and you know, grandparents, For me, they're a lot more reliable. I know for lots of people, their parents are not in a position to look after the children.
But this is another changing thing, isn't it? In terms of grandparents, like once upon a time, by the time you had children, your parents would probably be retired, or they might, you know, your mum might not have worked in the first place. Nowadays, when we're coming to have children, our parents are still working. They're not allowed to retire till they're 80. So, you know, they're still bloody working. They're not as reliable as they once would have been, are they?
And
did your grandparents ever look after you, Rish, when you were young?
Yeah, all the time. All the time.
Is it because they've retired? I think you were saying this last week, weren't you, that your granddad retired early?
Granddad retired early because he was in the police force, so had a sweet pension going on, so he was chill. But yeah, so I spent time with him. But the parental situation echoes what you said there, Hannah, about it was almost no point my mum going back to work, with kids, because actually it negated, what you'd earn anyway. So it was almost like, well, what's the point with all the stress, drama and hassle? When actually you should just stay at home and do the things that needed to be done, So yeah, and I've got a friend / work colleague I was speaking to just end of last week. They've had a baby's 13 months, I think he is now, and they live Yorkshire, but her parents live Norfolk, and actually they're moving down there because his parents are Northampton, and childcare is a thing, and it actually makes a difference where they are, where as to whether they get help and this, that, and the other, and it's that big a thing for them that they are moving, so
and that, I suppose the thing is, like, again, if we go back to our childhoods, women could and again, this is a massively unqualified sentence, but I suppose women were perhaps more able to take a massive chunk out of the career, so they could take 5 or 10 years off whilst they had their children and then go back kind of part-time working, and it didn't really impact them apart from kind of pension things nowadays. That's obviously impacted, but now there is this absolute massive expectation, isn't there, that women will have a baby and you will go back after either 9 or 12 months, and you will go back and you will work full time. And it's kind of even frowned upon now if you want to go back part time after that. There's like this sort of attitude of, oh, bloody hell, now we're going to have to find somebody else to do the other part time hours. I don't know. Do you think that's getting worse, either of you?
I think it's much more common to go back part time. I don't know anybody except me who went back full time. I don't know one other person full time after having their child.
Really? And what sort of careers were they in? What sort of sectors?
All sorts.
Oh, really? That's really interesting.
Variation. Yeah. I think the other woman that went back full time worked for mum's hairdressers. As a hairstylist for a mum.
Yeah.
But there, she could take a child in with her.
Yes, that makes sense.
But I remember working with a woman who had a child and no parents around, neither of their grandparents, and they had their child in nursery 5 days a week. And she said when the child went to school, it was literally like winning the lottery. It was like another £1,000 a month back in the coffers.
Yeah.
Which is just phenomenal, isn't it?
It is. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
What's your experience of it?
I was just going to say that the question there about, was it more acceptable, if you like, to take a chunk out before? I think my experience, or the women I knew, that were affected, if you like, it was actually, sector specific almost. So a lot of people that I knew that could take time out and did take time out had, roles like in the NHS, for example, or teaching and things like that. Whereas I think maybe now, is it that we're just more exposed to people that have got different roles, in different sectors, different aspirations. There's a whole bunch of stuff that comes into that.
When I used to work at the NHS, I worked with 2 nurses. They'd started their nursing careers on the same day at Whittingham Hospital in Preston. They both started training and they've been friends ever since, and they'd worked more or less in the same kind of departments and sectors their entire careers. One of them had 3 children and she'd taken 10 years out of her career. She'd taken 5 years out, then gone back part-time for 5 years. The other one had taken, a year off with each of her babies and gone back full-time. And she was able to then retire. They were both at the same point, but one of them, the one who'd gone back to work straight away, was able to retire a full 10 years before the other one was able to retire. So there is that, besides the kind of monetary factor, like you said, there's loads that ties into this, isn't there? But again, that was the NHS. That was they are, you know, they're an amazing employer, the NHS. They're good to work for if you've got kids, because you can have that level of flexibility. But I've not seen that as much in any other sectors, I don't think. What about in your sector, Reece? Do people tend to come back part-time after they've had a baby?
Well, to be honest, I've only ever known two people that have had kids in my industry, because it's genuinely
Because
male.
they're all men, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but this is interesting. So did none of the men become fathers?
Well, they did, yeah. And you know, so that's the point, isn't it? It's almost like, so two of the ladies I know, they came back but maybe changed roles or moved companies, you know. So there's all sorts of things that go with that kind of stuff. You know, was it that it wasn't inviting to come back into that business? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? There's that. But yeah, I had, you know, a team of men, you know, gents who became parents when they worked with me and around me for me.
And did they all come back full time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did they have their 2 weeks off and then they were all back? That was it.
And it was almost expected, you know. But I do remember there being, you know, conversation almost like, oh God, he's on paternity, like, as if it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And also, you know, there was definitely the, you know, well, why can't such and such go and pick the kid up if there was something, you know, wrong, or, you know, needed to be picked up from school, and all of that kind of stuff. So that was definitely there, and I was almost, you know, coming it from the other side, you know, because I've, you know, in most of my, you know, telco career, it's been mainly males that I've worked with. And you know, so I've seen it from their perspective, quite frankly, as opposed to the other way around.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I know we've had some men on recently and kind of asked them about their experiences, but this is absolutely a theme that keeps coming back time and again, that it is just not a societal norm that men will take time off to help with the childcare. If the child is ill, I mean, even now, Leon's school, they have got my number and Dali's number on file. Dali is down as the primary phone number because he has my old phone, which was the primary number when Leon joined. So his number now is the primary phone number. They will still ring me first if anything has gone wrong.
Oh, but you would, wouldn't you? That's not anything down to gender. Just competency.
But there absolutely is this assumption, isn't there, that, you know, the mum is going to be the one who goes to parents' evening and the one who goes to parents' assembly and the one who picks them up at the school gate. You know, even now there are maybe 2 or 3 dads and this entire gaggle of women that go. You know, the men are still in the minority. Again, this is something we've talked about before. But it is just absolutely a societal norm that the women will be the primary caregivers. And if something goes wrong with the child, you phone the mum and mum will go and pick them up.
Yeah, I know a bloke. I used to work with a bloke who's a lecturer, and his wife did the maternity leave, and then he dropped his hours to part-time when she went back to work full-time, so that and now he looks after the 2 children 2 days a week. And I think many people would do that, but it's the money, isn't it? It's the financial side. Who earns the most? I mean, in their family, I think they're fairly even thinking about what they do. But when I talk about grandparents looking after, you know, Naya, it was always her granddad who looked after her. And same with you, Reece, didn't you say it was your granddad that looked after you?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think it's really good these days that childcare in nurseries is subsidised. So you get 30 hours free childcare from the term after the child's, I think it's 2nd birthday. Oh no, it might be 3rd birthday.
Well, I think they've got to be, someone was saying their toddler's just turned 2.5 and they've got it. So it must be the September before they turn 3.
Something like that. We should have. If only we could have researched it.
Yeah. If only we could use Google and find these things out. But anyway, the whether it's 2 or 3, it's not important, because the key point here is that maternity leave finishes at 12 months and paid subsidised childcare doesn't start until 2 years. So there's an entire Is it 3? So there you go. There's an entire 2 years then when there is no help from the government towards childcare. If you need to put your child in full-time nursery, even part-time nursery, you get no help until they are 3. That's crackers.
Yeah. You do get tax-free childcare vouchers. So you can, this is like the big fucking whoop whoop moment, confetti cannons at the ready. So you can get, we never got our can of worms. You can get your childcare costs tax-free. So out of your salary, you'll get that proportion that you pay for childcare tax-free. From your employer. So you do that through your employers, and your employer signs up to the scheme, and any working parents there that want to claim that. I think it's like 1 parent per family or whatever.
So it comes out of your wages.
Oh yeah, it comes out of your wages, but you don't pay tax on the bit of childcare that you do pay.
Right. So what's that a saving of? Like maybe 50 quid a month?
20%. Yeah, 20% of your childcare costs, I suppose, but there's a threshold on it, so you can't get all of it. You can just get some of it. And
isn't that like just the fact that you're talking about this? Firstly, I'm fucking bored. Secondly, it's like this is just an absolute minefield, isn't it? It's like, for fuck's sake, I can't even be asked. I cannot even be asked to look for what is potentially available because they make it so difficult for you to find all of this kind of stuff. What it's like,
no, it absolutely is. I mean, this is the thing, because obviously they don't want anyone to pay for it, so they don't tell you. They don't, you don't get a little handy booklet when you fall pregnant saying here are all the free things you could have. You get your bounty box, don't you, which has like 1 free nappy in it and a tiny pot of Vaseline, and that's fucking it. Yeah, off you crack. Have your baby.
Exactly. And your employer has to sign up for it. You can't even take the initiative. You have to say to your employer, do you have this? And hope that your employer does. It's fucking ludicrous. Crazy. So, and also nurseries are shutting left, right and centre. There are very few nurseries, or there's far fewer nurseries than there were. And I think COVID is only going to make
Yeah, China, you have to put your child down for a nursery place like the second they're born. And again, I'm back.
No, you're back. Am I supposed to be?
Down.
I'll sort that out then.
I've got no idea what's going on. Anyway. So
Goldman Sachs apparently have a very thriving on-site creche, I suppose if you want to call it, nursery, that is part of the company's benefits package. They've done it for the last 20 years or so, and they've rolled it out across their global offices, but it costs fucking thousands and thousands to run.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? So if we're talking about, on-site creche facilities being the norm, for starters, it is only going to be really big businesses that are going to be able to do this. First, for one thing, you've got to have the space, haven't you? Really, practically speaking, you've got to have the space. You've got to get the licenses. You've got to have the staff, or your staff have got to be DBS checked. You've got to pay everybody. It's going to cost a fortune. This is not a realistic option for most small to medium businesses. I'm talking about big ones, and the ones that have got it, like Goldman Sachs, Google's is supposed to be really good as well, aren't they? Again, there's a benefit to people who are actually working on site, but there's all sorts of costs and regulations and criticisms and everything that go alongside that, aren't there? Again, that in itself it's a better solution, but it's probably not the panacea.
The college where I used to work had an on-site creche where you could put your child in for a subsidised cost. So it had a childcare department, a course, and they had a nursery that was
and all the trainees on it.
Yeah, because all the trainees. Well, it was post-16, but most nurseries are kind of popular. Most nurseries in primary schools are populated with people on work experience.
Yeah.
So I don't even know why people hire teaching assistants anymore. So not to downgrade, teaching assistants is a very skilled job.
He said that always right conviction. It's very scooter.
I'm just like
both teaching assistants.
Put myself in hot water there. But anyway, so and they opened that up to the community. So it was just another creche that was on offer to the community, but you could subsidise it if you were an employee. So it was really cheap childcare if you worked at the college, and they paid for it by opening it up to the community.
So how much was that used? Did every
it was full. I couldn't get Naya in it. It was full.
Okay, so that's not bad then.
Yeah, and they've shut down the college, but the nursery is still going.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. And was it on site? Was it on campus?
Yeah, it was on site, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like a kind of business venture, for the very enterprising. You could set up a nursery on your own site if you have the space and run it as a separate business and subsidise it for your staff. Because the benefits are, of course, you're accessing an entirely different workforce, or an untapped workforce of working women that have got skills and qualifications and experience, but they can't, afford to pay 700 quid a month on nursery fees.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question. Why are we still assuming that if there are on-site creche facilities that we are going to be able to attract women? Why are we not creating on-site creche facilities for the men to take their children to work and look after them?
Because it's the women. 99% of women, I think actually the figure is 97% of women are the primary caregivers and are the ones that give up work to look after their children.
Well, why are we not working faster and harder to change that perception? Why are we, as working women, not sending our kids to school to work with the men and saying, it's your fucking child as well, you deal with it? You find where it's going.
I can't answer that question. I'm just like, kids.
Well, I want answers, Marisha. I want to know why.
If I hear a child on the phone with somebody, I'm like, can you not just put it down?
Yeah. Can you just put it in the cupboard?
Can you just close the door for 5 minutes? Yeah, that's my attitude to it. So I don't know. I can't answer it. But it's a very good point, isn't it? That actually it shouldn't matter either way.
So why are we not allowing children into the workplace? Exhibit 1, Marisha.
Well, that's
Exhibit 2, children.
I have another point on this actually, because there is many percentages, that it's the women that are primary caregivers. Now, do you think though that there is a difference if the parents are no longer together? So where I've been, in businesses, or if I've, contracted or whatever, there might be, a dad there who's no longer with the mum that shares, parental responsibilities, i.e. goes home early on X days to pick them up from school, or brings them into the office because it's their set days for looking after the kids. So I think there is a bit more acceptance of that change because home life is changing. Okay, it's not necessarily driven out of a nice place or a good place, but I think there's the reality there that actually, men are taking more active involvement in that because of the nature of what's happening with relationships as well. Really, sorry,
there is that. Yeah. Well, no, I think that is a very good point, actually. And you're right. Is the fact that in order to take fathers seriously in the role of fatherhood, they have to be separated from the wives. That's a really kind of sad indictment on society, isn't it? But I know of several fathers who are separated from the mother. And even if if it's their day and they're supposed to be looking after the kids and one of the kids is ill, they will still phone the ex-partner and say, oh, they're ill, you'll have to go and get them from school because I'm in work, and that that's obviously more important. So so I think that's still kind of a default position, that they'll still delegate responsibility even if it is their day and they're supposed to be doing the primary childcare. But you're right, that might be the way in to changing mindsets, because I presume for most men in that situation there is no option, is there? There's no wife. They can't phone you know, their ex-partner or whatever. So they have to take responsibility, and that's probably the first time men have experienced it, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, you know, there's a lot to be said. I mean, like we do say often, you know, on this, that we're quite privileged in the roles that we are in business, and you know, using those examples, it's, you know, it tends to be men that are in, you know, certain positions, or the business owner or whatever, you know, so maybe there's a bit more flexibility there for, you know, I'm going, so that's what's going to happen, you know.
Do you know what? Yeah, as well. I've spoken to a lot of men about that kind of these issues recently, and you're absolutely right. A lot of men will say, "Oh, I wanted to work for myself because I want to be able to get my kids from school, or I want to be there more, or whatever." They are able to do those things because they have set up their own business, but they wouldn't have pushed for it. They wouldn't have gone to if they were in full-time employment, they wouldn't have gone to their employer and said, "I want to spend more time with my children. Please, can I have flexible working?" But they have seen that as a benefit once they've left full-time employment. So again, how do we empower men to start having these conversations? You know, do we think
many women that would go and say, I want to spend more time with my children, so can I have flexible working? I think there's a conversation to be had when women are planning to come back from maternity, and I've sat and had a conversation. Are you going to come back full time? You know, what are your plans? And I've also had that conversation with women coming back, not just, you know, me coming back. But after that meeting, I've never heard of anybody other than my friend who's a lecturer go to their employer and say, right, I'd really like, you know, my child is now 2 and I'd like to work part-time or flexi or whatever. Yeah. I'm not sure that there's the opportunity to have that conversation. It feels like that door shuts.
Yes.
Once and then all you can do then is go back full-time. I know plenty of people that have gone back, they've ramped their hours up once they reduce them. You know, when the child goes to school, they go and ramp their hours up or whatever.
What I think people will do is leave. So you're absolutely right that there is the opportunity when they're coming back off maternity leave, you have that conversation of, right, you know, what are your hours going to be, what are you going to work, how are you going to do it, and then that conversation finishes. But what women will then do is, if they're not happy, is they will go and look for another job. Rather than have that conversation. You're absolutely right. I know several women who have done that, and again, they've found different roles and said, you know, it's because they need more flexibility, rather than going to the employer and saying, can I have more flexibility in this role? They've just assumed they can't and gone somewhere else.
So and maybe an employer, you know, that might not always be a bad thing. Sometimes I remember where I used to work, there was a person who had a lot of time off. Their child was very sick, a lot, and they had a lot of time off, and you know, it was just them, there was no partner. And whilst I 100% sympathized and never made a big issue of it, it did impact the business. It did have a negative impact on other people around them. And there is a part of me that thinks, if you can't, you know, there's a limit to how accommodating an employer should need to be, because you've got to get the job done and you can't negatively impact everyone else around you. And it's not the employer's responsibility to look after your kids, really. You know, if you.
Well, this is it. Yeah, this is where it becomes really hard. So I was talking to a middle-aged man, works in a bank when we were coming back off lockdown, and he was saying everybody needs to get back in the workplace now. You know, and I said, well, the schools aren't back yet. What do you want people to do? He said that looking after their children is their problem. That's not my problem. I want everybody back in the office. And I was like, that's really unreasonable. But as a small to medium business, or especially on the kind of smaller side of the small to medium business, you absolutely have to have, you know, you want to be a nice, caring employer. You want people to have a work-life balance and be able to see their kids and take them to school or pick them up or whatever. But you're absolutely right. You have to balance that with the interests of the business. And if you've got somebody who is working, you know, part-time hours on a full-time wage, you can't sustain that. It's not, you know, it's not doable, is it? Or if they're not available, you know, if you have a phone that needs answering 9 to 5 and they're only available 10 to 2, you can't do it, can you?
Is that a dig at me, Rachel?
Well, no, I mean, you're just fucking useless and the whole business is falling down because of your selfishness. So I don't even know we're talking to you. I mean, what do you think, Rish? I know, if you had an employee rather, who came to you and said, I know you were expecting me back full time, but I would now like to drop my hours and come back part time because I've had a baby and they've just had a year off and you've been paying for maternity cover. How would you approach it? Would you be a hard-faced bitch? Or would you be nice?
I think it would. There's a lot of factors there. For me, there is. In terms of capabilities and all that kind of stuff. I think it comes down to the role that they play within the business. Whether it's when I say fundamental, I don't mean that flippantly, but do you know what I mean? If it's one person and that kind of stuff, there's. It would kind of depend. It probably shouldn't, but I think as a small business, you kind of have to take that view. I'd like to think that we'll do what we can to accommodate, but there's got to if I have staff, it's a case of I want everybody, in the business to be doing well, earning well, being capable, being, exposed to, different learning and things like that. I don't want people to just come in and, shuffle bits of paper around the desk. I want it to be different. But with that comes, elements of responsibility. So, there's a huge, way up, I guess, really to be done there. And ultimately come down to money. It's as simple as that, isn't it? And as an employer, you would have to. That's where it stops. Can we afford? Can we still get the job done? And that's it. Do you
are they good enough to warrant it as well? Like sometimes, I mean, not everybody is a wonderful, hardworking, brilliant employee. Some of them are shit, and you're glad to get rid of them sometimes.
Well, yeah, you're right. If you have somebody who is going to say, work an hour less at each end of the day, but that they will still get the job done in that time, then that's different, isn't it? But if it's somebody who's going to take an hour off in the morning and then they're going to spend an hour when they get into the office making a brew and setting the computer up, and actually you're losing 4 hours off them each day, that's a big difference. So yeah, it's an individual thing. Very quickly, because we're coming up to time. So the reason, and there was reasoning behind picking this subject today, is that it is half term. So how do we feel businesses should cope with allowing people to have time off? And again, this falls to the women, doesn't it? It falls to the women to either arrange childcare or take time off during the school holidays. So how are businesses supposed to do that? Do we think that people should be allowed to work from home during half term and summer holidays and stuff? Or again, is it just, it's your child, sort it out, we need you in work?
I think holidays are incredibly difficult. They pose such a problem to parents, and you have to have them. I understand why you have to have holidays, but I think there does need to be a better solution to it. And I think maybe with the whole COVID, the working from home revolution, I think maybe that might be a way of managing it, because both parents don't have enough holidays between them usually to cover the 6 weeks, let alone the rest of the holidays. And it is incredibly difficult. And now there's more restrictions on, children where your children can go. We used to kind of group our kids together and send them around places so that everyone got, time to do their work and stuff. And you can't do that anymore. So, yeah, I think working from home and flexi time are the ways that employers could manage it. And I do think if you've got an employee who for the rest of the school year works really hard, really well, full time, saying, oh, that's not my problem, isn't a great attitude. I think there's got to be a bit of give and take. I do believe that you shouldn't have well, no, I'm not going to say that because I don't believe it.
Don't encourage the hate mail, Hannah. I mean, we are very privileged because we run our own businesses. So Leon has gone to stay with his gran this week, but both you and I have planned. We've got light diaries this week because I presumed I would have childcare, and you thought you did as well. Even though our husbands are also at home, we've planned that into our diaries so that we had lighter weeks in terms of appointments. But what I would have
taken the week off. To be fair, Dave's taken the week off to look after her all week.
Has they? All right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, fair dinkum to Dave then, fair dues. But I've taken Leon into the office because, I need to carry on doing my job. But again, I can do that because it's my company. Also, Leon is a very well-behaved child. So he will literally just sit there and play on his laptop or his tablet
one of them.
or whatever.
If you had 3, it would be different.
Exactly. So, for a lot of people, again, that's just not practical, is it? So we're running out of time. Have we solved anything? It's a lot better.
I'm not even sure we answered a point.
No, the world's shit for working parents, and that's basically it. Do we think it is the government's responsibility? Is the $1 million question. Do we think it's the government's responsibility to help businesses out with this? I know we've got a Tory government and they're incredibly reluctant at the moment to help businesses with anything more than they already have, haven't they? But is it kind of society as a whole's job to ensure companies are reimbursed for things like this so that people can have more flexible childcare, or do we think it is just for parents to sort this shit out?
I firmly believe that we have a responsibility as a society to look after everybody in that society. Mm-hmm. And saying, "Oh, it's not my fucking problem," I don't think is an acceptable attitude. Because if for no other reason, if you're not going to bring compassion into it, it trickles down. If you have children who have inadequate childcare and inadequate access to early learning before they start school, and very long days, and they're going to after school clubs and breakfast clubs, and they're out the door for 9 hours a day, they can't do the homework and so on, they're going to grow up to be less productive, confident members of society who have got less economic potential, worse health, poor mental health. Studies demonstrate this. This is proven that a kind of bad start in life leads to a bad life, and it compounds as they get older. And as a society, we create more problems than we then solve, and it's more expensive down the line to fix what we should have done at the beginning. So even if you're of the mindset that you've made your bed, you lie in it, you've had these kids, you fucking look after them, then it's a very kind of short mindset, in my opinion.
It is, but that's a very altruistic lefty argument, isn't it? And if we're trying to convince,
this is my point. Even if you're not being altruistic about it and you're just being purely commercial, in 20 years' time, these children are going to grow up. They've had less sleep, they've had less exercise, they've had less nutrition, they've had less access to homework. They're going to grow up with health problems, mental health problems, less economically active.
But even so, your average Tory voting business owner doesn't give a shit about that. So the way we've got to sell this is that actually this is not just the problem of the parents, is it? Because if we have inadequate childcare, it's the people without children, isn't it, Rish, who have got to pick up the slack and keep the workplace going, and it's the employers that have got to pay people and have people missing because they haven't got adequate childcare. So actually, it's in the child's best interest, it's in the parents' best interest, but it's also in the best interest of those people who aren't parents and employers, financially and socially and economically. There we go. That's a point. Final words, Rish?
What? Yeah. Whatever she said, basically.
There we go.
Do you think that an employer has got a responsibility to help an employee, or do you think the government has got the responsibility to look after people's children?
I think it's a bit of both, because I think in the an ideal world, you would have employees that you actually like and you want to work for you and do a good job. So therefore, trying to help them out in some way, shape or form if they've got problems with childcare, or you know, slightly more flexible working to be able to accommodate whatever they've got going on, you know, actually benefits everybody all round. You know, that being said, you know, when you get to a size, it becomes numbers, doesn't it? It's literally, you know, figures on paper, and it's not, you know, that kind of view, really. And fair enough, you know, because they have to, you know, apply the you know, rules to everybody, you know, because you can't be that flexible. So, but you know, you want to think that, you know, flexible working was still kind of, you know, an ideal goal with whatever that is. And I think we come from it, you know, coming from very similar sectors also as well. But if you are in a manual labor kind of role, you have to go to work to do your job. You can't do it from home, you know. So there's all sorts of things, you know, that we could explore there as well, really. But
yeah. Brilliant. Well, there we go. We have to end it there, I'm afraid. I have to go and bath a shitty cat. So that's it. We'll be back next week.
Why is it always ending weird? Like, you had a shitty child, you've got a shitty cat. It's just,
what are you going to cover in shit next week, Marisha? You have to cover something covered in shit.
I mean, that's something, you know, arranged to occur.
Well, can you please?
Yeah, can you please? Can you plan better for next time? It's your turn for the shitty thing next week. And on that note, bye-bye.
See you next time.